Hello, and welcome to issue number 29 of ComiCentric. And I'm sorry, what's going on here? What the? Shit. Hello, and welcome to issues 29 of ComiCentric. I will be your host today. I am the CruzKeeper. And on today's show, we have 4 terrifying tales to tell. Straight off the bat, let's get it off and going with today's first tale, brought to you by Mr. Peter Molini of Nostalgic Books and Comics. Take it away.
Hello, this is Pete Molini, and this is my scary story. It was April 2005. The reason I know that is because it was right after Sin City came out. I had my appendix removed after a weekend of just really bad pain. Unfortunately, I had it removed right at the end of right before they started microscopic surgery. So it was I have a big old Frankenstein scar. I was in the hospital for about 3 days, and they told me I could go home as soon as I could walk. I couldn't even sit up without, it hurting a lot. After about 3 days of just, the worst hospital experience, I decided I had to try walking. So I stood up, I grabbed onto the IV, the machine, and they told me to walk to the end of the hall. At the end of the hall, there was a unused wing of the hospital. You could literally see the darkness. Where the hall ended, it just was just darkness. And I freaking hobbled my way over. I had to walk to the end of the hall. It hurt a lot. It hurt. It was like the most pain I've ever been in. And I got to the end of the hall. I used the machine to turn around, and I had to psych myself up to go back the other way. And I had my back towards the darkness. And as I stood there trying to psych myself up to go the other way, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around, there was nothing there. I turned back around, and I practically ran. It was probably the most scary experience of my life. And needless to say, I was able to walk. I went home the next day. And that's my weird ghost experience.
This proves that sometimes all we need is a little spectral push. Go a long way sometimes. And on the next tale, we have Monica Serrano with Generational Spook.
So my name is Monica, and I guess we could call this Generational Spook. So this story was told to me by my grandma. A lot of the times I kind of had to just piece other parts together, and me and my sister recently just put it all together on our own. My grandmother lived in a little city in between San Diego and Escondido called San Marcos. And that's when I can trace the very first event back. She lived in this old 2-story house on a little dirt road in the middle of nowhere, kind of like Courage the Cowardly Dog. And she was raising my mom and my uncle at the time with her husband. And they lived in this old house. And she would tell me stories about this tall man dressed in black that would knock at their door look through their windows. And sometimes she would tell me that my grandfather would see him at the foot of their bed. And I guess they kind of just learned to live with it. They had a priest come and bless the house at one point, and the priest told them that he was going to leave a cross, and wherever they found the cross is where they would find the root of the spook. That's when my grandmother found out they had a well on the property, and that's when it just got worse. So they ended up leaving the house. They came back to Compton. This is fast forward to when I was born, sometime in the 80s. And I remember we lived in this house in Compton on Laurel Street. And it was a house that was divided into two. People lived behind us and we lived in the front. And I remember hearing a lot of footsteps as a kid. And at one point, I remember hearing like boot steps back and forth every night at the same time at midnight. And I would just chalk it up to just people walking the block. But then, as I got older, I was like, okay, who the heck is walking around like that at midnight with boots every day at the same time? So as I got older, I started to kind of realize, hey, maybe there's more to this, and I got closer to my sister. We were a little estranged at one point, and she told me, this is something that's been following our family around for a long time. So my sister ran away from home when she was 15, and, she got into a lot of trouble, and she told me about this one occasion where this man was staring at her from across the street in Huntington Park, and he was dressed like a cowboy, all in black, same dude that my grandma saw, same dude that I would hear. And this was like in the 2000s. And she said that she was high out of her mind and that she thought, okay, maybe I'm hallucinating or seeing stuff. And she said that the dude looked up at her, walked across the street towards her, and that as he got to a halfway point between her and where she was standing, that he just disappeared into smoke. So I was digging around, and I started to find out that my grandmother's mother-in-law used to do witchcraft, and she didn't like my grandmother at all. She didn't want her to marry her son, so she did something to my grandmother, and this dude is a generational spirit that follows us around for whatever reason. I had stopped hearing the noises at one point. I attribute it to me stepping away from my family and doing my own thing and not being around that anymore. But recently my sister came to stay with me for a few months, and it started again. So it followed my grandmother, followed my sister, and now it's back with me. It's gotten to the point where my kids don't really like being home alone, particularly my oldest. It doesn't really affect all of my kids, but my oldest is the one that kind of like wakes me up to tell me stuff. Like yesterday, like 2 days ago, he told me that he was in the restroom and he heard somebody say, "Please help me," in the hallway. I have really never experienced something that I can say that really scared me, but what I can say is that at one point I really didn't want to be home by myself. We did find out that an older woman passed away in the house, but I don't really feel like that has anything to do with what my kids experience. It's messing with my dogs. Like, my dogs get scared. They really don't want to be by themselves. They'd rather just be like outside most of the day. My sister's boyfriend has said that he's seen somebody standing at our doorstep trying to look inside of the house. And when he said that, I knew that he wasn't lying, because that's the same thing that happened to my grandmother all those years back in San Marcos. That this dude was like looking into the house through the door. So I just attribute it to it being like, well, he realized that my sister's here, so I'm going to come pay them a visit. And nobody wants to be alone in my house anymore. My dogs stare at the wall, and I hear footsteps at night again. I hear people walking outside, and I would really like to know what this person wants, because my grandmother passed away. My sister doesn't live there anymore. And I mean, there's no real need for him to be around doing this anymore. But yeah, that's our generational spook. Right on time, visiting my new house. And I hope you guys like my generational spook.
Be careful when the man in black comes around. There may not be a need for alarm. The man in black may mean no harm. Our next tale comes from Nathaniel Osoyo, Eye Drought. He recants a childhood occurrence.
All right. I don't really have a name for the story, but my name is Nathaniel Osoyo. I am an artist and illustrator, and I draw the book Dark Mouse. And I just released Dark Mouse, The Climb, and Other Tales. And today I'm going to tell you a scary, slightly scary story, mostly superstitious, but like the kind of like key detail comes at the end, and so that'll happen as I'm talking. So this takes place when I was very young. I had to be like 4, maybe 5, and it was a dark night, and it was on or around Halloween. And I don't remember much about the night. I remember this incident, and I remember telling people about it like throughout my life. And I even like doubted myself at some point. And even today, there's like a little bit of doubt. Like, did I really see this? And, because like I'd like to think I'm a reasonable human being, but like the validation that comes later is kind of a trip, at least for me. So like I'm 4 or 5 and I'm in a costume. I don't remember what costume, but I'm in like a parade of children walking down the street. Or at least that's how I remember it. It might have been just a group of kids that were all dressed up and trick-or-treating down my street. And we're all in our costumes. There's little black capes and Batmans and little tiny Grim Reapers and ghosts and the witches and whatnot. And we're rounding this corner right near my house. And it's not a long story. And we're rounding the corner right near my house. And I look over to the side. I look across the street to where this little kid, Robert, used to live. Robert lived there with his mom and I think with his dad. I can't really remember, but he was cool. And we look at Robert's house. And it's Halloween, so some houses have decorations. About 20, 30 years ago, not everybody was going all out on Halloween. Some people would do that, and they definitely didn't. And for whatever reason, we saw this like pink glowing light, or I saw this pink glowing light from that was like glowing from their front door. And as we're like walking across the street, I'm just like looking at this light. I'm like, that's weird. Like, why is there like it's Halloween? They must have put like some interesting light, as much of a thought as a 4 or 5-year-old could have had that way. Like, oh, that's unusual, and start articulating about it. But like, I noticed the light, and then as I looked closer, I started like hearing somebody talking or like somebody almost singing, probably mostly talking and almost like giving instructions, like stay away or like don't approach or be careful or like that kind of thing. And as I'm looking closer at this door or at their door, I realized, oh, it's the screen door that's out front. And at this point in my life, I don't even remember if they had a screen door, but it looked like a screen door. And behind it was this lady in what looked like a tooth fairy outfit, but as genuine and as like real tooth fairy as you can think of, like a beautiful sparkly gown. And she even had a wand, and her hair was all big and curly because it was the 80s or like early 90s. And she was like giving some warning or something, or like be careful out there, like children, that kind of thing. And I was just like, whoa, that's crazy. And then that's like kind of where the memory ends. And like, so throughout my life, like some people have asked, like, because you're human, you have those conversations of like, oh, have you ever seen a ghost? Do you believe in aliens? That kind of thing. And I'm pretty skeptical. I'm open to the idea of different things. Like a few years ago, somebody in the government admitted that UFOs were real. And well, of course UFOs are real. That's an unidentified flying object. That's just them admitting like, yeah, we couldn't identify that thing in the sky. Probably it was a plane, but we couldn't tell what it was. So now it's a UFO. Doesn't mean that like they are harboring aliens. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. So like they have you have those conversations growing up, and people ask you, "Have you ever seen a ghost?" And I tell this story, and I really only kind of like tell people outside of my family, like friend groups and whatnot, just because probably like some survival instinct. I don't want to get I don't want to become the butt of a joke or something. Until last year, I told the story. I can't remember if I was telling it to my wife, and my sister was in the room, and I was like, oh man, I swear like this happened when we were little kids. And then my sister Jacqueline, she was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I was like, what? Really? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, you remember like the lady across the street? And she's like, yeah. And like the pink glowing light. I was like, yeah, there was like a pink glowing light. And so like she like validated it. And I was just like, wow, like I remember that happening, or maybe like we've both just been telling that story that long, but it's a trip that like she would like remember that also. Like if it didn't happen, how does she also have the memory? So like it's a strange thing that I'm like, still like I have my doubts, because if I was 4, she was 3, so like there's still some question in my mind. But it was kind of a trip last year to realize like, oh, I've been telling this story and you have too, like your whole life. Like this is it's a thing that happened. And that's my tooth fairy, potentially ghost, and potentially just a couple of kids with overactive imagination story. The end. Brought to you by Mephisto's Ghost Stories. If you want a good ghost story, go to mephistosghoststories.com. Sign up today. Use code BOO. BOO.
Sometimes living with childhood's experience can be less of a coincidence when two people share the same narrative. What a trip. And on today's final tale of terror, we have Tanya Sotelo with Rebecca, or Becky for short.
Hey, what is that? A booming voice asks. The question startles me. I stop browsing and identify the voice belongs to a burly-looking fellow standing at the back of the comic book store near the bins of dollar comics. I know the question isn't for me, but intrigued, I glance over from where I stand near the entrance. What's what? The man behind the counter asks, not even pretending to be interested. He doesn't even look up from his reading. The first guy is a regular. They have an easygoing, almost friendship, so he doesn't seem to take offense by the other man's lack of interest. That tiny door. At this, I tense up. I had been dreading this moment since the store first opened. At this, the bearded man finally looked up, following the direction the tall man's finger was wagging towards. I don't have to look to know what he's pointing to. Huh. He puts down the comic he was reading. That is weird. I guess I never noticed that. I don't think it's a door, though. Looks more like a window. He's right, of course. It is a window. Perfectly shuttered and almost imperceptible, it recedes into the wall. It doesn't make any sense to have it there, of course. Bizarrely, it is facing inside the store. Only I know what the small space behind it holds. I know because that's where I've been staying for many years without incident, and I hope it stays that way. If I could sweat, I'd be sweating buckets now. I look nervously between the two, neither one of them paying any mind to me. Finally, the guy behind the counter shrugs and goes back to reading. Ah, come on, Pedro. You weren't the least bit curious? He asks, making his way to the register with a handful of books in hand. Nope, Pedro responds as he rings up his purchases. What do you think is up there? He asks. This is more to himself since Pedro was obviously not interested, but to his surprise he answers. Probably rats or maybe a raccoon. I sometimes hear something scurrying around up there. My face begins to warm in embarrassment. I prided myself on being imperceptible, and I had screwed up, gotten too comfortable, and had unwittingly made my presence somewhat known due to my carelessness. I'll have to work on that. I wander back to the entrance of the store as the conversation thankfully shifts to what they are reading. For the remainder of the day, I loiter in front of the store. I don't head back inside until it's closing. I stay out of Pedro's way as he does his closing duties as best he can, but I can tell he's beat. He wipes the same spot half a dozen times. Finally, he sighs in defeat. I'll do it in the morning, he mutters to himself before calling it a night. I wave goodbye, not that he can see it, since I'm purposely concealed. Still, it's the force of habit. I wait about 10 minutes or so before I venture from my hiding spot. I head over to where I stash my comics, eager to dig in. But a pang of guilt stops me. Now it's my turn to sigh. As I put down my stash, I grab a broom and sweep the store and dust the counters and all the surfaces. I hum to myself as I work. I'd sing this song if I knew more than a snippet, but the words dissolve in my mouth like cotton candy. It's a sad song about a lost love. Goes something like, "Where's my darling girl with the raven curls? Her lips are as red and as sharp as rubies. She's there by the old oak tree with outstretched arms. She does call to me." The sound of someone at the door startles me. It's not Pedro. He has his keys, and it doesn't sound like keys unlocked to me. I walk through the front window. The pressure of the solid glass passes through me. I can never get used to that sensation. It's why I prefer to go through open doors. Once outside, I see the pair of geniuses trying to pick the lock. I gather they are in their late teens, early 20s. Designer clothes, designer teeth. I groan in disgust. Great. Some thrill-seeking rich kids trying to get their adrenaline rush by ripping off the little guy. I walk back inside. I head to the counter to press the silent alarm. My finger hovers above the button. If I press it, maybe the kids get a slap on the wrist. Mommy and Daddy get them off the hook. Wouldn't it be better if I used this opportunity to teach these young adults a valuable lesson in respecting small business? Selfishly, of course, I could also blow off some steam, as today had been a bit stressful. It's a win-win in my book. That was all the convincing I needed. I free my hair from the confines of its ponytail and unlock the door. The two practically fall on top of each other as they lurch through the entrance. They giggle, not yet realizing it was not their handy lock-picking skills that got them in. They scramble to their feet. The one closest to the door reaches over to close it, but it slams shut. Not too hard, I'm not trying to damage the glass. He recoils as if bitten, his partner oblivious. "Did you see that?" he asks his companion, his voice cracking. But his question goes unanswered as his friend is rummaging behind the counter. The bright fluorescent lights flicker on momentarily, stinging their eyes. "What the hell, man?" scoffs the one by the door. "It wasn't me," his friend hisses back. The lights flicker on and off in a frenzied display. Both boys begin to panic, sweat beading their brow as they look around nervously. A hazy red glow begins to fill the room. It rises from the ground, from underneath the doors, and from between the cracks in the walls. A nifty trick I learned from a traveling poltergeist. I slam a pale hand onto the counter, nails scratching at the glass. Their terrified shrieks tear through the silence. I pull myself slowly, deliberately across the counter's length towards their screams. I gave them a night they would never forget, and a therapy bill their parents would be paying for a very long time. I did feel bad for Pedro. He had to get up and come down to the store to make a statement, since one of those poor saps had found the silent alarm and called the cops on themselves. The police chalked it up to them being high, breaking into the store and having a bad trip. Pedro decided to close the store for the day. He didn't feel like dealing with the mess. He was too tired. After he headed home, I decided to grab my stash and read all day. I'd help with the cleanup, of course, but I couldn't be too obvious about it. Strange as it may seem, for me, this is the perfect arrangement. I people watch and read all I want. In return, I help around the shop. I'm like an unofficial employee. In the morning and at night, before going up to my attic room, I tidy up the store. Lost items will miraculously appear the next day. There is also something to scratch my itch for mischief. Not like tonight. This was a special treat. Most days, it's on a very tiny petty scale. More along the lines of gently harassing rude customers. Nothing serious, of course. They may just find their energy matched by an invisible force. Be condescending or feel the need to yell, and maybe you'll be overwhelmed by the feeling of impending doom. Or my favorite is when, after repeated requests from the friendly staff to not live auction in the store, the offending party's phone will suddenly glitch and die. I don't want the store to get a bad reputation because of me, but every once in a while, some little ghost shit is called for.
Wait, you're telling me that thing lives up in the here in Nostalgic? Well, screw that. I think I'm out of this. I'm not gonna hang around here for that long. In that case, thank you very much. For those of you who still are listening, have a good morning, good day, and good night. And bye. Say goodbye, boy.